Hello and welcome to Property Matters, a weekly look at all matters property designed to be of interest to anyone who has an interest in the property market. And Property Matters is supported by Fairview International Property Consultancy and auctionproperty.co.uk. Each week we focus on the big property stories that are making the news, and we'd love you to get involved by adding your comments in the comments section below us, wherever you're watching today. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe so that you can get notifications of when we go live every time we do. And you can email us, propertymatterstv@gmail.com, if you've got anything you want to share with us. Joining us as always for Property Matters, Joe Joshi. Hi, Joe.
Good morning, Paul. Good morning, everybody. In a week when Mr. Putin decided to start shooting around the world and yet another change comes, the stableness of the property market is still there. It just goes to show no matter how many bombs he throws at these properties, they will get rebuilt and they will stay up eventually. Saddened with all the lives that happen to be lost in between these silly games that people play. But it's been an interesting week, considering the last couple of years have been interesting in all sorts of things that have been thrown at us. But we stay steadfast where Property Matters is concerned.
It's certainly been an interesting few years for news stories, that's for sure. And one of the things we will do, of course, is to keep an eye on the property market, the influence of what's going on in Ukraine on the property market over the coming weeks, and if there's any real big issues that might affect it, particularly in terms of property ownership by Russian individuals in London, for example, that may well be an area that comes up as a topic in the next few weeks. Today, Joe, we've got one of your favourite subjects, really, conveyancing. So I know this is going to be an interesting show because you're going to have plenty of opinions about this. So let's just dive straight into it this week. And this is the story that's come out this week about the National Trading Standards, or the catchily named NTSELAT. This week, they've announced that by the end of May 2022, all property listings will need to contain the property's council tax band or rate and the property price, the 10-year information for the sale, in a new effort to improve the availability of upfront information in the conveyancing process. And that's been broadly welcomed by the industry, although there are a few people that have raised eyebrows about this. This new compulsory information is designed to help home movers make informed, educated decisions about the property. It must be included on all the listings, and if the listings don't have all that information on there, so if you want to have POA on there for price on application, then it's going to have a little a red exclamation mark. It's going to have a notification on Rightmove or wherever you see it to show that you haven't got all the information at your disposal. And this really goes into in line with the government, or what they're saying is it's going into the line with the government's levelling up scheme in the white paper, which spoke of ensuring the critical material information buyers need to know is available digitally wherever possible from trusted and authenticated sources and provided only once. Now, this is quite interesting, isn't it, Joe? Because effectively, they're saying, a lot of people get to the point where they've agreed a price, and then they get to the solicitor stage and the conveyancing starts, and then all of a sudden they find out a problem. It might be it's in a flood area, or there's going to be a road across the end of the gardens all of a sudden. And then, of course, they have to pull out the deal. I suppose what they're saying here is that if that information was up front, then people wouldn't make an offer in the first place, and a lot of time and money would be saved. But it's not quite as simple as that, is it, really?
No. So, yes, it's an interesting subject, Paul, and thanks for bringing it up for discussion. I think a lot of people will have their views on it. Without a shadow of a doubt, you'll get my views on it, as you rightly said. So, the problem has been, and I've sort of alluded to that, I think, in as many programs as I can think back, that the conveyancing system itself is so archaic. And what this is doing, I suppose, is answering some of those questions. The problem is it's where the burden of fault will lie, ultimately, where who's going to be blamed for it and who's going to take the blame for some of the things that are going to not be done correctly. And unfortunately, this is going to travel downhill, and it's going to end up with the agents. So, the agents are probably the ones that've got now more to do than they ever had to do. And in fact, I think that this leveling up will probably go towards licensing agents, because there'll come a time when agents will get crucified for not providing the information, and it almost, that will be their penalty, that will be their punishment, and eventually they'll say you've got to be part of some scheme, or you've got to have some sort of qualification in order to be able to even start to market these properties. I mean, this is where I see this ultimately going. The blame has always laid with the solicitors, and unfortunately it still lays with the solicitors, primarily because they're the middlemen in this transaction. So the buyer and the seller both rely upon their legal advisors, who are their solicitors. And of course, they rely on the agents to provide the details. Of course, the agents actually rely on the seller to give the information. So the question is always about who and where do you pass the buck to, and whose fault it is going to be. And what this is saying is, and it's something that I have said, that the auction business has really always had that right, because they do provide a legal pack up front for someone to make an informed decision prior to making a bid. And then it's buyer beware as to what it is. But I certainly say to everybody that please download, make sure, wait for the legal pack. When you've got it, whether you actually choose to look at it or study it or give it to a solicitor, that's obviously down to you. But it is up to us as the auctioneer to make sure that we provide you, the potential buyer, with a legal pack that a seller solicitor would have given to us, and has the basic, if not as comprehensive information as possible about the property that you're going to buy, with the investment that you're going to be looking at. So what this is now doing, this leveling up scenario is doing, is that they're saying that there should be so much more information available to the agent, who should actually theoretically not put it on the market. Now, this actually did come to light some many years back, and it's kind of slipped under the mat, where people have got a bit lazy and said, it's okay, let's get it. Because it's time. We want to, as an agent, get the property on the market, because if it's not on the market and it's not marketed, it's not in front of potential viewers, we're not going to sell it. If we don't sell it, we don't earn our money. So we want to get it on the market yesterday. So I got an instruction today, it really should be on the market by the end of the day. However, the rule is that it cannot go on the market until certain aspects of it are ticked off by the seller. You have a copy of the details from the seller to confirm that they are as true information as possible that has been given. And it's not until then you should really put the property on the market. But we take a view and we say, okay, well, let's get it on the market. We can always alter it. But ultimately, if something's not correct, misdescription wise, it could fall on the agent's shoulder to say, well, you've actually marketed this, put this description on it, it's not correct, so you have described the property, and therefore you're going to get punished. The lawyers will turn around, who should be providing this information, are just going to be bogged down, and they'll just say that we haven't got time to give you that, and because they haven't got the time to give it to you, the marketing process can't begin. So the whole process is really archaic. Now, they should and they could simplify a lot of this, and it has become a little bit more simpler when you do searches, local searches, water searches, any other environmental searches that need to be done. Majority of those are now available online and can be done in a shorter space of time. The question is always about who's going to pay for it. That's the whole of this thing is about money. And because we have alluded to this world of everything can be done for free, the expectations are that it's going to be done for free. And therefore they don't want to part with any money until a sale happens. So the way the system works at the moment is that, I, as an agent, would go to someone's house to put their house on the market, do the details of the property, and that person would not have to pay me a single penny. And if they did have to pay me a single penny, there's always going to be another agent that's going to follow me behind me, and he'll say, actually, I'll do it for free and buy you dinner as well. And if you like, I'll book you a nice hotel. And, it's just stupid what they do. These operators come into the world. Now you got some other new operator who says everything can be done for free. There is no such thing as a free lunch. Someone somewhere is going to pay for this. And mostly it's the vendor. And I'll explain why I say it's the vendor. But so that's part of the problem. The problem is that people don't want to pay for the service because everybody tells them they can get it for nothing. So you imagine you're trying to sell your property, and the agent comes along and says, I'm going to charge you, £550 up front. The solicitor needs £500 up front because he needs to get you the searches. I need to get this stuff done, and get myself prepared, do the marketing. Most people say, well, chap came before you and he said he'd do it for nothing and plus buy me lunch as well. So that's where the problem comes, and that's the systematical problem, because the solicitor hasn't been paid, he's not going to do any searches. He's going to wait until he's been paid to do the searches, because he's got no guarantee that he could spend that money on the searches, and then the people change their mind and say, actually, we changed our mind, we're not going to sell, so those searches aren't necessary. Why did you do it? So it's all about the money part of it. And that's what the education has to be going forward, that you have to pay to get a service. If you want a job done properly, you've got to expect to be paying for it. It doesn't have to cost you the earth. And the reason why it's going to cost you a bit now and save you long term is every time you get into that situation about selling a property and a buyer falls through and so forth, and things go out of time, it's the time that kills it, because people get impatient. They say, I'm going to buy this house. I bought it, offered on it 4 weeks ago. 6 weeks later, 5 weeks later, 4 weeks later, still haven't had the searches. Actually, I've seen something else I like. I'm going to go and buy that. And that causes a huge problem. And the vacuum, the time in the whole transaction, gives the option for people to turn around and say, well, actually, I've changed my mind. I don't want to buy that. I'm going to buy this one because that's better. And so forth. And that's where, so this leveling up of trying to tighten the system, provide, clarity up front, is all about reducing the time and reducing the costs that people are incurring each transaction, each opportunity wise. And sometimes you can have 3 or 4 transactions, because for one reason or another, a sale may fall out, have a fall through, maybe because they couldn't get the money. Maybe because the couple parted company before they actually even decided to go anywhere. So they might have made an offer 4 weeks ago, and 4 weeks later they've actually decided we don't like each other anymore, so they're not going to buy it. And there's like a whole barrage of circumstances and situations that can actually be brought to light that makes people change their mind. The seller is the one that then suffers, because the seller is turning around and saying, I thought I had a buyer and I'm going to go and spend money on the next one. And then that's the ripple effect of the chain. But this is where I endorse the best method of sale is the auction method, primarily because, yes, you do pay an entry fee for administration. It's a shorter time. It might be 8 weeks before you actually exchanged and done. But in that period, as it exists now, they've got to have a legal pack, a fairly comprehensive legal pack, giving them as much information so a buyer can make an informed decision and buy. And if you imagine the time span that's shortened, every 6-8 weeks, somebody was going to do an auction. In that period, they're going to find the property, find the legal papers, and find the money and do the deal. That is got better chances than what the current system has, though that is the system. And what it does need is to have the legal paperwork and as much information, true information, up front, in order for a buyer to make an informed decision as to whether they want to buy that. And then it comes to the next stage, and that next stage becomes within the hands of the legal people, and they could spend another 6-8 weeks playing ping pong, asking absurd and stupid questions in some cases, just because they've got a volume of work. So, you need to be careful who you're using as your lawyers, whether they are specialists in what they do, because that's what it boils down to, Paul. Sometimes law firms take on things that actually they're not specialists in, but because it's
Mm.
potentially an income, they'll take it on. So it has to be a level of horses and courses.
Yeah, this is the National Trading Standards Estate and Lettings Agency team in partnership with the estate agency industry. It's important to say that actually the agents and the letting agents requested this clarity from National Trading Standards in the first place because they just wanted to know what should be disclosed as standard information for marketing a property. And this is part A of three parts. This is a three-phase project which includes information that is considered material for all properties. A further two phases are being developed, which will incorporate further material information such as restrictive covenants, flood risk, and other specific factors. So most agents, I think 90 something percent, are already complying with this part A. So they've already got the council tax band on there, they've already got the price on there, and so on. So this is a fairly much a straightforward one. But when it comes to this part B and part C, that's when the agents are going to have to put the work in. And this is where the devil is in the detail, really, because a lot of people are saying, well, even though that's great to have this clarity, if you're buying a property that's, let's just say, on the Atlantic coast, a bungalow on the Atlantic coast, versus a high-rise studio apartment in Lewisham, the information that's required for the buyer is going to be quite different, isn't it?
Very different. I mean, it's and that is the case with pretty much every property. They are unique in their own circumstances, so therefore, getting that, even getting the basic information, is quite challenging. Now, I know that over the years I've sold hundreds and thousands of properties, but sometimes the seller doesn't even know what they've got.
Mm.
Because they probably owned it or they inherited it from within the family, for argument's sake, and they don't know what the answer is. They don't know what the covenants might be. They don't know, what part of the land is green belt and what part of the land is brown belt, or what part is garden. There's loads of things, the basic information that even they don't know. So they have to go to their solicitor because he's or she are the only ones that understand the jargon that is written in the old deeds as to what could be and what could not be as part of that conveyance, and what is part of that land and part of that property. So they are all unique and they are all individual. However, modern blocks have got pretty standard leases and pretty standard terms and conditions. So they shouldn't have, but it's only the older properties, the dated back properties, that will probably have more complexity in terms of what their title might offer and what their title may not offer, back then. But as we go on, it becomes more and more important. At the end of the day, what I've always said is the best investment, property is the best investment, and you want to make it right. You want to make sure what you're buying is right, and it's only up to, at the moment, the legals, the solicitors in the game to provide you with the documentation that they could trust. Part of the reason a lot of the sales fall through, in all honesty, is because the solicitors can spend for life just going ping pong over something that they don't understand. And you have to understand that law is always about a matter of opinion. What is right for you may not be right for me. It might be the right thing for the next guy, but that's always going to be. It's a matter of opinion. And so that happens to be on the text of all the documentation. It's what they see that wording to be. Is it this? Is it X or is it Y? And they could spend months analyzing who is right and who is wrong. But a lot of things now have insurance covered guarantees, like indemnity policies and so forth. And sometimes, against time, it's just as easy to get an indemnity policy put in place and face the music if and when it comes along. It probably doesn't, but that element of doubt created in the first place, probably by a conveyancing solicitor because they've raised a point, puts a doubt in a buyer's name or in a seller's name, and then it's an uphill battle to try and make it work from there. And eventually it falls through, so that's where costs come in. A sale fall through means that they've already had to part with searches and solicitors' money and time, and then they've got to go again for round 2, 3, 4, and 5 maybe.
Mm. So last year, Trading Standards did a survey of 300 agents. They found 91% agreed with a defined list of basic material information, and that would help in clarity for the industry. 93% supported the mandatory disclosure of information relating to property tenure, and 88% agreed that leasehold details should be disclosed. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, if I've got a flood risk on a property I'm trying to sell, I'm not going to be keen to divulge that right up front, because no one's going to come to view the property. But if we make an analogy to selling a car for a second, you know, it's down to the buyer to look the car over and see where the problems are, just as it currently is in the property market. So why should we move from a system of discovery, if you like, to a system of disclosure? You don't do that in a typical sale for a car or any other transaction, do you?
No, but that's where they want to go with it, because that's what's going to A, reduce the number of sales, and B, reduce the number of fall throughs, and C, probably make people stop and think that, are they really buying the right thing here? You know, successive governments have a way of utilizing the property market to their best effect. And this is exactly what's happening here now. And what's happened is that we've had a couple of years, 3 years or so now, of good property market. They need to put the brakes on the system rather than it going on reverse gear. They'll fall into neutral for a while until this kind of stuff is tidied up, and then it'll go back up again going forward. It's very rarely gone backwards. You know, I call it a correction. Some people call it house prices are falling down. Newspapers would say house prices are falling down because it sells more newspapers. Bad news sells. Someone like me, I would say that we're now in a neutral and the prices are getting correct because of supply and demand. The demand has been slightly reduced, so therefore people are going to become easier. But right now in the industry, you know, supply is tough. It has been tough for the last couple of years now. So property is undoubtedly the best investment you will make. Going forward, what they're suggesting here is getting more information about the property that you're buying. I can tell you that when somebody wants to buy a property, half the time they're not interested in what the information says. You know, I'll use the analogy of back in the early days when I did mortgages, and so because everybody could do mortgages, it wasn't a regulated product. You know, you didn't have to go through loads of classes. A guy came in, filled out a form. I took it to the building society manager on the Friday before we went and had a bit of lunch and said, here's 5 applications. And then by Monday or Tuesday, he'll say, yeah, I've sent the surveys off for that one, and here's the offer. Boom, end of story. But then, of course, you know, everybody had to get qualified to become a mortgage broker. And that started to bring out everything that there is, you know, warts and all. And subsequently, some people qualified and some people don't. And it was a lesser few that probably didn't get qualified that started saying that they'd been unfairly treated. And because they were unfairly treated, the government and the industry had to take precautions in making sure that they weren't left exposed. So they actually put a new system in place and everybody had to get qualified. And that's what I'm saying. At the beginning of this program, I said that what this will lead to is ultimately even the agents having to have some sort of license and qualification in order to be able to do this, because there'll be a whole bunch of people that'll just say, bugger this, I'm not going to do that. I might as well go and sell, you know, jacket potatoes or something, because it's just too much hassle. And so there will be a fallout of a number of people that will come out. Some of it will be generic because they will come to retirement in time, and some will be because it's different. You know, as much as I hate to give the man a little bit more of a plug that he's having in the last a couple of weeks, there's a specific agent that is, you know, got more publicity than the Prime Minister lately for more swearing and so forth, because he thinks it's going to change the industry. And, you know, he thinks the industry is so bad, yet he comes to work in that industry. And it's the industry that he loves. So it just kind of, you know, makes a mockery of the whole thing. I want to make a change to the industry, which is archaic and dinosaur, he says. And at the same time, he turns around and says, I love this industry and that's why I'm in it. So, you know, you can't have both. Why are you in it if you think it's so bad? But you're in it because you know it makes money. And ultimately that's what it is. But those situations, that's what this will sort out. It will, as much as high street agents might be boring and not doing their thing, but if they're doing it correctly and they do it properly, they will be the ones that will still be in business, and some of the others will just have to move on to other things. But I think that all of this leveling up, this white paper, this whole streaming of documents, getting the information up front, is part of the journey towards a licensed agent.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, whilst there's broad agreement, and in fact this did come, as I said earlier on, from the estate agents industry. People wanted the clarity, but there's a lot of criticism for the national standards themselves, because this stuff has been law since 2008. Effectively, CPRs and BPRs became law in 2008. And obviously, they replaced they became primary law affecting estate agency practices as of 1st of October 2013, when they replaced the Property Misdescriptions Act. So this stuff has been it's been illegal to actually misrepresent a property and withhold information for many years, and yet here we are in February 2022. According to one agent on Property Industry Eye, saying that we're being told the people who supposedly have been enforcing that law since day one are still working on how to do that, because they've not prosecuted anybody. So here they are saying, oh yeah, we better sort this all out, but they've had the powers to do that since 2008, and they haven't done anything about it. And so that's a pretty swathing comment there.
It is, but part of the journey from 2008 to where it is now was a pretty neutral journey, you see. So it kind of didn't have an impact when it was all agreed. 2007, the financial crashes happened. 2008, nobody moved, and until 2014, there wasn't really any house sales. For 7 years, it was on a neutral stage. So there probably wasn't anything going on for prosecutions and so forth. And now that we've had a couple of years of sales again, it's probably reared its head in the leveling up and saying, well, we better do something about this law that we passed in 2008. And now's a good time. Several reasons, isn't there, time? One is that they've decided to make a commitment to reducing the emissions, and so therefore they've got to go for this category C on the EPC by a certain time. All of these things are brought into trying to, calm the market down, get it a little bit more sensible, not drop it, but just saying we have got to do certain changes, and those changes will just put the brakes on in generally. But they're not bad changes. I'm not saying that they're bad changes. I think they're good changes. If they can actually speed up the process ultimately of a transaction, then I think we would have had a success story. But I'm not sure that everybody in the cog, in the whole system, is actually going to pull their weight and get it to that point. So
there seems a lot of mistrust in the situation, because you've got the conveyancers. Estate agents think that the conveyancers are passing the buck. They get the clients to ring the agent rather than speak to the solicitor. Now they're told to do part of the job as well. So how does an agent find out about a flood risk? How do they get the tenure, without spending more time and therefore more money, which money will go on the cost of selling the property? They can't access the land registry data for free. Why can't they do that, for example? And yet this takes 4 months to sell. The process takes 4 months to go through with solicitor, and now the agent's being asked to do even more of the work of the conveyancer. And also, the other point that's made here is that there's plenty of laws already not being adhered to with no recourse. Every single day you see properties with no EPCs, agency agreements without the full fee, including VAT, misleading write-ups, misleading photos, and this is just something else that won't be done and followed through with and prosecuted on. Interesting views.
Like I said, that it's down to money, because nobody wants to pay for it. There is absolutely no reason why an agent cannot do the searches. However, an agent doing the searches has no trust or validity, even though they're not actually physically doing the search themselves. They will probably employ an independent search company who will go out and do the search and send it to the lawyer, to the solicitor, to the agent, sorry. But because if it's not coming from the solicitor, there's no belief in it. Do you understand what I'm saying? The problem is the buyer or the seller then of a property says, well, my solicitor says that this search was provided by the agent. I can't verify that. So therefore, either you sign this disclaimer to say, this is my get out of jail card. I didn't give it to you, and you can go to the agent. There is the problem. There lies a huge problem. But the answer to that question is that we can do the searches. We don't personally do the searches. We have companies that provide those packages. But the reason why you can't take up those packages is there's going to be somebody else in the line further up who's going to say, sign my disclaimer because I'm not the one that provided that information. So why should you make a claim on me if it goes wrong? And my indemnity, my public liability insurance goes up. You go and see the agent. The agent doesn't want to do it because it's going to cost him and he's going to be charged. He's going to let the solicitor do it. And in the meantime, who's going to pay? So nobody wants to pay. But, there, like I said, there are operators out there who do it all for free. And maybe that's the answer. Go to them first, bugger up your sale, and then come back to proper agents.
I was just going to conclude this story by saying that's one thing that we can probably hope for is the death knell of the £99 sell for free or sell for £99 type deal, because if there's more work to be done, it really will be too much of a pain. But I guess those are the sort of people that would skip that kind of work anyway.
Oh, I mean, that's another subject. You don't want to start me on that one.
No,
right now.
indeed we don't. Well, let's stay on the subject of conveyancing because I know it riles you so much. But this is an interesting one. This is from a lady called Kate Bold, and she's the managing director of Index West Midlands Property Information. Now, she's found out something quite interesting, and I'm not sure if you knew this. I certainly didn't. Councils are now categorising new road schemes as planning permissions for private bodies, meaning that they are invisible to the standard questions answered within the local search for home buyers. This growing trend is leaving home buyers vulnerable to unseen road schemes that are planned but not yet under construction within 200 metres of their doorstep. And conveyancers wide open to complaints, according to this lady. She's launched a new campaign to try and make people aware of this. So here's an example, Joe, just to get us started. 3 weeks after moving into his new luxury semi-rural property, the buyer discovers the home was to be perched on the edge of a major new road scheme built to give access to a huge mixed-use development less than a mile away, which would have 2,670 houses, a 120-bed hotel, a railway station, sports facilities, offices, a supermarket, secondary and primary schools, 2 children's nurseries, a library, doctor's surgery and offices. I mean, that's quite extraordinary, isn't it? Determined to find out how the plans for this major road scheme had not appeared in a robust set of searches ordered by the solicitor, she says she spoke to the council's highways and planning department. What this detective work revealed was an alarming, unbelievable and very concerning trend. Many councils are putting many approved road schemes under outline planning permissions with the developer, which means they are not revealed in the local authorities register and thus not revealed in any standard search inquiries. That's quite frightening, isn't it?
It is, but that highlights the first topic we did just then when I said to you that who takes the blame. Now, can you imagine that search was done by an agent and the solicitor says it's got nothing to do with me, he gets away with it. But 9 times out of 10, these searches are done by exactly like this lady who runs a company that provides information for doing searches, etc., and has discovered that councils put outline planning into a separate category so that it doesn't show up on the main search. And yes, of course, my heart goes out to the man and a lady who bought a lovely country home and not expecting, the main A road to be going past their front door. And that is part of this whole journey, is to say that they should be able to do that. But no, I had no clue, no idea that councils were categorizing this, and it's obviously something we learn every day of our life, and it'll be something that I will certainly take it, put in my thinking cap. And next time somebody says you need to ask those questions, it's saddened that trusted local authorities and people in local authority, because that's who we rely upon to give us, provide us with the current up-to-date information, actually don't tell you that some of that current up-to-date information is in a separate category. So, if the boot was on the other foot with the same local authority, they will be in riles and fights and arguments to say that, you didn't. So imagine, I know of a situation where a friend and a client and an associate, was, I think, 0.5 centimeters high on the ridge or something of the roof of his house. Neighbor kicked up a fuss. The councillor came and said, look, you've got to reduce the level of your roof. Well, they're there, but how are we going to do it the other way around when you say you've actually hidden this and you haven't told us this and you haven't answered it? What they're going to say is, that wasn't the question. You asked us this question, so we answered you that question based on that. You didn't ask us, are there any roads in the way? So there's always a get-out clause for somebody somewhere. And councils are clever in trying to do that when they want to. But, my heart goes out to those people that bought that house and now going to have a massive road going through it. And then, ultimately they'll have a problem selling it. Someone somewhere is going to be punished for that. I'm sure we'll read about that as time comes along. But that, again, goes back to this thing about the conveyancing and about the system. And most of the information is now available online. But, ladies and gentlemen, it costs and nobody wants to pay for it. So, that's where the problem lies. So you can have all your answers, but got to put your hand in your pocket.
What's interesting, Joe, is that the TA6 form, which is the one that's completed by the seller when they sell the property, that reveals, as you well know, all the good and the bad, the neighbour disputes, the flooding, the knotweed, and the planning applications that the seller knows about. But what's significant is that local search includes questions regarding road schemes, but doesn't include road schemes by private bodies or developers as a standard part of the form. So what she's saying is that she's urging conveyancers and solicitors to select an optional inquiry 4 on every residential property transaction from now on. This is an optional question that can be paid for and asks the same question as in the standard query, but it does then have to give the private bodies information as well. So that's a good tip. If you're looking at a property, you need to do the optional inquiry 4 so that you can see if any of these things are being planned, because that seller of that property knew what was going on, which is why it was up for sale.
Absolutely. But then equally, why does it take a situation like this to actually say to somebody, you've got to have an inquiry on option 4? It should be standard policy that your solicitor or the person that is providing the legal pack or the conveyancing pack to the sellers, to the buyer solicitors, provides them with a complete package. That's what they're looking to buy. And some of that fault may lie on the fact that they didn't do their job correctly in the first place and ask all the questions. I know people will turn around and say, well, we weren't asked that question, so we never answered that question. Well, that's life, isn't it? If you don't ask, you don't get. But yes, you're right. The sellers probably did know that this was happening. They also knew that they didn't have to answer for it because it was an outline planning and they checked all of that out. The reason why that form exists and tells you, and that all came in line, I don't know, I think it's about 10 years ago, about even if you've got a dispute going on with your neighbor and so forth, that made people stop and think about whether they want to have a row with their neighbors. Because actually, when it comes to selling it, they're going to have to disclose that they've got some sort of dispute going on, and the next person may not want to do that. It goes back to my presentation of the house. I keep saying time and time again, work with your neighbors, make your house look nice from the outside, because that is going to add value. But if you don't talk to your neighbors and you have a dispute with them, then that's where it's going to be. I can tell you, I've got a property on the books right now, and I had a call this week, in fact, only yesterday, actually, last night, from the neighbor that has that property, who came to me and said to me about all sorts, and then eventually opened up and said, actually, I'm just the neighbor, and I just want to know, it's been like that for 7 years. What do you think is going to happen? I said, well, it's going to be like that for another 7 years if you're not careful. And she said, why is that? I said, because the people that are causing the problem are you and your other friends, the neighbours. Every time a buyer goes to look at it, you guys come out and start telling them all the bad things about the property. So if you want to carry on doing that, then you're not helping yourself. And she went, oh, yes, yeah. I said, so, enjoy it. It's a nice view. It's your next door. And it's going to be like that for as long as, you continue to do that. And then she said to me, well, maybe if there's viewings, you can call me and I will do all the viewings for you, make sure. So she changed the track and thought, because I told her that it's going to remain the same for as long as it does, because the only people that bugger up the sale are you. So, buyers want to buy it, but every time somebody walks around it and you go out there and start telling them how bad it is and how horrible the neighbours are and so forth, what chances are you of them wanting to live there? And she went, I didn't see it that way. So I said, well, no, maybe you should see it that way, because otherwise you're going to be living next to that for another 7 years. And so it's important to make sure that you do get on with the neighbours and you work together, because it does affect the ultimate value of your home.
The lady says that when they actually looked at this particular individual's question 4 optional inquiry, they actually found that the road application had been approved in 2012, would you believe? And they actually only started work in 2021. And the extraordinary thing, I mean, put yourself in the guy's shoes here, Joe. I mean, he says the first that we knew about it was 3 weeks after moving in to the new property. Contractors arrived and dug up a wide piece of grass verge adjacent to the property at the same time as removing several established trees. I mean, it's everyone's worst nightmare, isn't it?
Yep. You couldn't write that story if you wanted to, but they do exist. And what it goes to show is that, no matter what happens, you got to go with the sixth sense, check it out yourself, and obviously, put in place whatever protective insurance that you can do in order to cover yourself.
Just so people know, the optional inquiry form costs, depending on your needs, between £20 and £45. And I would suggest that that's probably the best £20 you'll ever spend in your life, wouldn't you?
They got to agree to spend it, Paul. This is the point I'm trying to make. They don't want to part with any money, let alone. So, when you say life is free, and everything in life should be free, that's the price the chap's paying for, because he probably didn't. First of all, he probably didn't know about it. Secondly, his lawyer probably didn't know. He did know and didn't want to ask him for the money. And thirdly, he didn't want to pay for it. So now you pay for it big time.
Absolutely. So there we are. That's what we came up with Property Matters for in the first place, wasn't it, Joe? To give people valuable information like that. That £20 could have saved him a lifetime of pain, arguably. So anyway, that's the value of what we bring into Property Matters. Hope you enjoyed today's show. It's all we have time for. We're back again, of course, next week. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Thank you, Joe, for your wisdom as always. We'll see you next week.